Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and this is not a normal wrap-up. Let me tell you that March was probably the most disappointing reading month I have ever had. I read 4 books with the full intention to read more than that, but unfortunately, because I was in such a rut with the books that I did end up reading, I couldn't bring myself to get through more than these 4. And out of all of them, none of the books got above a 3.5 star for its final rating. So that tells you where we're going with this. That has never happened to me. Ever, that I have read 4 books in a row where not a single one was a 4 or a 5 star, and unfortunately all of them were 5-star predictions as well. So where did it go wrong? Well, it all started with The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. Given the fact that this is a sequel, I can't say crap about it here, so if you would like to hear all of my thoughts and feelings, of which there are many, you can go and check out this video where I do an extensive review of just this book. But I will tell you that unfortunately it was not what I expected it to be, and after giving The 3-Body Problem 5 stars, I was incredibly disappointed to give The Dark Forest only 3.5. After reading The Dark Forest, I decided I wanted a palate cleanser, a book that was going to be easy to read, and I had a buddy read scheduled with my friend Kat from Kat's Novel Adventures, where we were going to pick up Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. Her and I got together after reading it and spent at least a solid hour talking about this book, and unfortunately, not in a particularly good way. This book is a prime example of false advertising. The marketing guru who did the book blurb on the inside of the dust jacket completely lied to us. So I'm going to tell you what I thought the story was about and give you a little taste of what the book actually contains without spoiling anything. This is how the story was pitched and I understood it. So this is about Tova, who is an older woman that decides to become a janitor at a local aquarium after the death of her husband because she's just trying to keep busy. 30 years ago, her son disappeared off of a boat and it was some sort of tragic accident, and Tova never learned the truth about what happened to her son. Inside the aquarium is a giant Pacific octopus named Marcellus, and Marcellus takes a liking to Tova and decides that he is going to help solve the mystery of what happened to her son. So I think it was pretty fair to assume, based off of the dust jacket information, that this was going to be a story about Tova and Marcellus. It was going to kind of be like a 50-50 split between the two of them. We were going to be getting octopus POV, you know, where Marcellus is a character, and I was really excited about this to see how their friendship changed and adapted over time. And unfortunately, that's not what this book is at all. And if I had to give 3 words to describe this story and what its main problem was, I would say needs more octopus. Marcellus does get his own POV, but they are incredibly short. I mean, I'm talking 1 to 2 pages at most before it ends up moving on to the next chapter. So rather than it being about Tova and Marcellus, instead we get the perspective of some asshole 30-year-old named Cameron, who's not mentioned in the book blurb at all, which is weird because of how significant a part he plays in this book. He's basically Tova's other half, and then Marcellus just kind of gets thrown in there every now and then. I'm not going to spoil anything about the story or the mystery in here, but I will say that it is not as emotionally mature and in-depth as I was expecting this to be. I thought that this was going to be one of those stories that just was gut-wrenching and made me cry and made me feel a deep connection to the characters, and unfortunately I really couldn't relate to any of them. Marcellus was definitely my favorite, but Tova was quite shallow and Cameron was just not a likable guy. I was able to guess at a significant portion of the ending of the book, which for me is never a good thing. Some people like it when they can guess the end of a book. I hate it because it means one of 2 things. Either the author revealed their hand too early in the book, which I do think is what happened here, or the story isn't original and it's something I've seen somewhere before, which I don't think is the case. I do think that this is an original story. It's just Had I known what it was actually about, I may not have chosen to pick this up after all, which was a huge disappointment. I am so devastated to tell you that I only gave Remarkably Bright Creatures 3 stars, which sucks because this was the book that I thought I was going to love the most this month, and it ended up being one of my least favorite instead. The third book that I read was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which was for my Picture of Dorian Gray read-along that I did with a few friends of mine, and we did both a Storygraph read-along and a live show, which if you would be interested in checking out, you should definitely do that here. Had a ton of fun making that video and hanging out with them. I will say I had significantly less fun actually reading the book. I'm not going to harp on this book either, only because we did have an entire discussion about it, but I will say that I typically have problems with stories where the main character is unlikable unless the book is written incredibly well. I'm talking about The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt kind of well, because when I read that book, I thought that it was incredible, but I hated the main character, but I couldn't rate it poorly just because the writing was so amazing. For The Picture of Dorian Gray, I don't think that a story that had so much pretentious fake philosophy could ever be an exceptional book in my eyes. The representation of women is also atrocious, which is another reason that I just couldn't absolutely love this book. And the really sad part of it is that in the beginning, I found the book quite engaging. I was curious as to what was going to happen, waiting for Dorian's decline. But this leads me into a criticism that may end up being controversial for some people, which is where I just don't really view The Picture of Dorian Gray as being horror in the traditional sense. Do I recognize that at the time it was written in 1890 that The Picture of Dorian Gray was probably a shocking and scary story? Absolutely. Is it that by today's standards when we have authors like Stephen King? No. So as a horror reader, I was sitting there kind of going like, tick-tock, all right, like I'm waiting for the debauchery to happen, I'm waiting for the murder to happen, I'm waiting for all the crazy things to occur, and that's just not what the story was about. It was salacious at the time, but by our standards now, it's kind of drab. So I ended up giving The Picture of Dorian Gray 3 stars as well. Which leads me to my last, but thankfully not least, book, and that was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. The main thing I want to start with for The Midnight Library is that if you were ever recommended to read this book, it's not a bad story, but you need to be in the headspace to handle a character who is clinically depressed and committing suicide, because that is what the premise of the story is about. Nora Seed is unhappy with her life and she decides to end it on her own, of her own free will, and ends up in the Midnight Library where she can go and live other versions of herself to see what her life could have been like if she had made different decisions. This is probably not the book that I should have ended the month on. I probably should have started with it only because I had spent the entire month being disappointed by the other reads that I had picked up, and I needed something that was just going to make me feel really good. And particularly in the beginning of this book, that is not the case at all, because we are experiencing Nora's depression and everything in her life that is going wrong, and it just doesn't feel good until much later in the book when we're kind of getting the moral of the story. March is always a really hard month for me, only because it's that time of year when the good weather kind of peaks out every now and again, and then it goes back to being frigidly cold, so I can see spring on the horizon and I'm sick of the cold at that point. And so when I'm cold, I'm miserable, and it was just a hard month. And so had I decided to start the month with this book, maybe there's the potential that I could have given it a 4-star, but I will tell you in my honest feedback that I don't think that there's any point in time that I could have read this book where I would have given it a 5. The main reason for that is because while it was unexpectedly a sci-fi story, which I did enjoy and actually gave it a plus in its favor, it was a multiverse story. and I have read better multiverse stories than this. If I had to give a recommendation over The Midnight Library, I would tell you to go and read Blake Crouch, read Recursion, read Dark Matter. Those books were two that I gave 5 stars, and both of them were incredibly surprising. The endings I didn't see coming from a mile away, and that is something that I loved about those books. This was another one where I guessed at the ending, and you already know how I feel about that. The Midnight Library has a positive message overall, and I liked what the author was trying to say. I just think that it was heavy-handed. It was kind of preachy. You know, you're talking about you need to make the most of your life, and you need to view everything being positive, and, you know, just take things in stride. And it's like, yeah, we've heard these messages before. That's not necessarily anything new. It's just kind of in a new package. I'm also somebody who suffers horribly from secondhand embarrassment, and Nora is put into many situations in this book that are socially awkward and she has no idea how to handle, and I found that incredibly anxiety-inducing. So overall, I gave this, as I said, 3.5 stars. And we have now come to the moment in the video where I would be telling you all of the things I'm excited to read for the month of April, but unfortunately, I don't have a list for you. I am not creating a list arbitrarily at the beginning of the month and just deciding to stick with it because I need to mood read so badly. The first thing that I felt like reading, like I truly was excited to pick up, is Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez, which I have begun reading already. I am on page 59 of 588, so I still have a ways to go. But I can tell you that this is the horror that I was needing from Dorian Gray and didn't get. So I'm automatically feeling so much better about April than I did about last month. Wish me luck that it continues to be good. I have better feelings about it. I'm not going to say I have amazing feelings because you never know how a book will go until you get to the end. But I'm happy so far, and that's really all that I need. The only other book I can confirm that I'm planning on reading in April is Death's End, which is the 3rd book in the 3-Body Problem trilogy, and that's just because I want to know how this is going to end. It needs to be better than The Dark Forest. I hope that it's as good as the 3-Body Problem because I loved the first book so much, but I'm a little concerned because after I had my review for The Dark Forest, some people who have read the entire trilogy told me that this book is more like the 2nd book than the 1st book. I don't know how it's going to go. I have tempered my expectations significantly. But I do know that after I get done reading this, I can go and I can watch the TV show that came out in March, which I've heard amazing things about. So wish me luck that I do end up enjoying this, but if not, I have something else to look forward to, and maybe the TV show will be different. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these books and how you felt about them. If I didn't like them and you did, I am still happy for you that you ended up enjoying those stories. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.